Hello and welcome to a deep dive into the history of Iran. Today we're going to tackle one of the most pivotal and, of course, mysterious figures in our history, Ardashir I, also known as Ardashir Baba Khan. Ardashir is truly a great historical enigma. The central question, and what makes this figure so fascinating, is this: how could someone whose exact origins are the subject of so much debate suddenly appear, overthrow the centuries-old Parthian Empire, and establish a new and powerful dynasty like the Sassanians? This situation is somewhat reminiscent of Darius the Great, who also needed to justify his lineage to legitimize his rule. So our goal today is to take a closer look at Ardashir's challenging journey, based on all the sources we have, from historical texts and archaeological findings to inscriptions and coins. We want to see how he rose from that initial obscurity to the pinnacle of power, what obstacles he overcame, how he defeated his rivals, both his brother and the last Parthian king, and ultimately what legacy he left behind. All right, where do we begin? I think the best starting point is the very ambiguity of Ardashir's lineage and ancestry. The differences in the accounts are very telling. On one hand, we have non-Iranian sources, like Roman or Byzantine historians. They typically emphasize Ardashir's unknown or even common origins. They suggest his father might have been a tanner or a simple soldier. Some sources go even further, claiming Ardashir may have come from a lower class, perhaps of slave origin. The image they paint is that of a rebel with no aristocratic backing, a completely ordinary man who rose from the bottom. In a way, a self-made man, though this portrayal by the Romans might have been tinged with a degree of condescension. But on the other hand, we have our own official accounts, like the Karnamagi Ardashiri Papagan, the book of the deeds of Ardashir, son of Papagan. Here, the story is completely different. The Karnamag presents an epic image of Ardashir. It constructs a detailed and calculated genealogy that attempts to connect Ardashir to great figures of the past. For instance, it links him to a figure named Sasan, who himself is a semi-mythical character and perhaps a priest of the temple of Anahita in Estakhar. It even goes further, trying to trace Ardashir's roots back to the legendary Kayanian kings. This was a conscious effort to build a powerful narrative and legitimize his rule. This contrast in perspectives is very interesting and shows that from the very beginning, for Ardashir and his successors, constructing a powerful narrative to justify their rule was as important as winning on the battlefield. Identity building was key from day one. Now, moving on from the debate about his lineage, let's get to the rebellion itself. We often think Ardashir rebelled directly against Artabanus, the Parthian king. However, the story seems to be more complicated, and evidence suggests a different path is more likely. It appears Ardashir's initial rebellion was first against his own family. His father, Pabag, who apparently held a significant position, whether political or religious, in the region of Pars, had seized power there. According to some sources, Pabag chose his elder son, Shapur, not Ardashir. This led to a family conflict. Ardashir, unhappy with this choice, went his own way. He left his family's initial power base near Estakhar and moved to a region that later became known as Ardashir Hwara, modern-day Firuzabad. He established it as his own center of power, built a strong fortress, and began to assert his strength. In the midst of this, his brother Shapur was removed from the scene in a way that isn't entirely clear. A popular account is that as he was on his way to fight Ardashir, the roof of a building collapsed and he was killed. This incident is very suspicious, and many believe it couldn't have been an accident. In any case, with Shapur out of the way, the path became clearer for Ardashir. What's interesting is that during this whole time, Artabanus IV, the Parthian king of kings, did not show a very serious or direct reaction. He likely thought it was a local, internal conflict in Pars and that they would resolve the problem themselves. After his brother's removal, Ardashir officially declared himself king. This happened around 211 or 212 CE. The famous relief carving at Naqsh-e-Rajab, which depicts Ardashir's investiture by the god Ahura Mazda, is likely from this period. This inscription was a powerful visual statement of his claim to kingship and divine legitimacy. From this point on, Ardashir expanded his territory, taking over other cities in Pars and even Kerman. It was then that Artabanus realized the true danger, and it could no longer be seen as a local issue. A confrontation with the central power became inevitable. The final decisive battle, known as the Battle of Hormozgan, likely took place in 224 CE. Its exact location is unknown, but it was probably somewhere in today's Khuzestan province. The result was a decisive victory for Ardashir. Ardashir was killed in this battle, and with his death, the era of the Parthian Dynasty's rule effectively ended after about 470 years. This was truly a major turning point in Iranian history, the end of one era and the beginning of a new one. Now the question is, how did Ardashir, after this massive military victory, manage to consolidate his win and lay the solid foundations for a new empire? Because defeating an enemy is one thing, but building a stable empire is another. And this is where Ardashir showed that he was not just a good military commander, but also a shrewd politician and a smart administrator. His actions were swift and multifaceted. Stamping his seal on the realm. One of his first acts was to build or rebuild cities and name them after himself, like Ardashir Quara. This was a way of declaring ownership, saying, "This place is mine now." Coinage as propaganda. He minted new coins with his own image and new titles. On these coins, for the first time, we see the title King of Kings of Iran, Shahanshah-i Iran. This is very significant. It meant he was no longer just the king of Pars, but the king of kings of all of Iran, claiming succession to the great kings of the past. He even used a phrase that described his lineage as being from the gods. The Mazda-worshipping Lord Ardashir, king of kings of Iran, whose lineage is from the gods. This claim to divine descent was an incredibly powerful tool for legitimization. State religion and ideological unity. Ardashir understood that to unify this new empire, he needed a common and strong ideology, and that ideology was Zoroastrianism. With the help and cooperation of prominent priests like Tansar, he began to collect and codify the scattered Zoroastrian religious texts, the Avesta. Through this, Zoroastrianism was established as the official state religion. This act both defined the religious identity of the government, strengthened its ideological foundations, and increased the power of the clergy, who were important allies for the king. Linking to a glorious past. Ardashir cleverly used the heritage of the past, especially the Achaemenid heritage. The best example is his choice of Naqsh-e-Rustam, the site of the magnificent tombs of the Achaemenid kings. By doing this, he was sending a very clear visual message. I am the continuer of that greatness. I am the heir to the glory of ancient Iran, and my dynasty is the continuation of that great empire. Founding administrative and military structures. The foundations of the famous Sassanian bureaucracy and powerful army were also laid during Ardashir's time. Although these structures were greatly expanded during the reign of his son Shapur I, the beginning was with Ardashir. Offices like the Hazarbed, perhaps the commander of the royal guard, the Ganzwar, treasurer, and the class of Dibiran, scribes, gained importance from this period. In the military sector, the reliance on armored heavy cavalry, the famous Azwaran, which became the backbone of the Sassanian army, became critically important from this era. So, to sum up, the journey we've explored is the story of the astonishing rise of an individual from ambiguous circumstances, filled with contradictory narratives. A man who first faced family challenges, then managed to overcome them, and ultimately brought down an ancient empire like the Parthians. But more importantly, through a rare combination of military ambition, political shrewdness, and an extraordinary ability to construct a historical narrative for himself, And by using ideological tools like religion and a connection to the past, Ardashir was able to lay the foundations for a dynasty that, for the next 4 centuries, was one of the 2 major powers of the known world, and had a profound impact on the history of Iran and even the world. This story shows us how individual ambition, when combined with a deep understanding of the need for legitimacy and the ability to shape historical narratives, can change the destiny of nations and empires. The true legacy of founders like Ardashir, beyond the military conquests and the buildings they constructed, perhaps lies in these very narrative constructions and structural and ideological foundations.